Welcome to another episode of Empowered. My name is Luis Carlos Estrada, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Dave Frankie. Welcome to Empowered. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Luis?
Doing good, doing good. Paul Thomas, one of my professors, that he was in my podcast too. Probably some people might remember. It was the podcast when we were talking about the Google Earth, Activision, PlayStation, and all these companies. And yeah, so Paul told me about you. We connected a couple weeks ago, and now we are recording, right?
We are. Hopefully, Paul said good things. Paul's been a good friend for a long time.
Yeah, I just had class with him yesterday, and I forgot to tell him that I was going to record with you today, but I'll see him tomorrow in class, so I'll make sure to tell him. Just to start, I would like you to tell me more about your background and how did you start. For those people who don't know who you are, I would like to know more about your background.
Sure. So I'll give a longer answer. So I was born and raised in the state of Washington, in Spokane, Washington. Went to University of Washington for my undergraduate studies. My parents divorced when I was young, and my father moved to Phoenix. So as a child, I was coming to Phoenix during summer break to visit him. So I became familiar with Phoenix. And when I graduated from university, I had a undergraduate degree in political science. I'll admit that I started taking some business classes my freshman year, and I did not care for those classes and decided political science was a better route for me. My parents had both my parents had taught me that if you don't know necessarily what you want to do, and you're not intending to be a specialized worker like a doctor or an accountant or something, that focus on a liberal arts degree. Liberal arts teaches you how to think critically, problem solve, communicate well. So that's the path I ended up taking. I moved down to Phoenix, decided to move down to Phoenix after graduation. And I first went to work for a real estate development company here in Phoenix that at the time was one of the larger development companies here in the local region. The company was mainly focused on master plan community development, which means they would buy large pieces of land, say 2,000 acres, 5,000 acres, sometimes up to 10,000 acres of land. They would perform all the zoning and entitlements and put in the horizontal infrastructure, so roads, sewers, electrical, and then they would build out the community by selling smaller pieces of land to home builders who would create a subdivision. They would have commercial pieces, and they'd sell parcels to banks and stores and things like that. So they would build out these residential communities. I started there as a market research analyst, spent my first few years doing that analytical work on just really assessing all kinds of market data, creating reports for management, for bankers that we work with, for investors that we worked with. And after a couple of years of apparently performing well, they needed someone the person who was managing the research department where I worked had moved on, and so they needed someone to step in and run the department. And they asked me if I would do so. So, as a young person, I had my first taste of leadership and taking over. It was a department of about seven to eight people. I ran the department for a couple of years, and then in the 1990-ish timeframe, there was a national downturn, in particular around real estate, based on a banking crisis, in particular types of banks called savings and loan banks. And Phoenix always being a high growth, very real estate centric economy, was hurt much more deeply than other parts of the country. The company I was working for was feeling that stress. They had a lot of debt on their projects, and they were feeling the stress of the downturn in the market. So my father, who had become a well-known business leader here in the Phoenix area and successful business leader. I turned to him and said, I think I need to leave the firm I'm at and find a new opportunity. You know a lot of people here in town. Do you have any thoughts of who I might talk to or people you might introduce me to? And he surprised me by saying, Dave, I've been creating a small investment portfolio for myself that I want to continue to build of different assets. Why don't you come work with me and help me continue to build out a portfolio of assets? I had to think about that. It wasn't an easy decision thinking of working for my father, but I made that decision and now have been working for him and with him over 30 years. My brother, who had different experiences, eventually came over a few years after I did as well. And so for the last 30 years, we've been operating as what's called a family office, putting our capital to work across a wide variety of different investment types and opportunities. Circling back to education, I did feel like it would be, after working for some years, I realized it would be beneficial for me to have that business education underpinning and have a stronger set of analytic tools within me. So I went back and did a master's in business administration, did an MBA at Arizona State. So I did get some of that business background as well, along with just learning a lot over the years. So, what I first started doing back then and what I continue to do today is really not that different over the years. Some of the complexity has changed, but it's, having an investment opportunity presented to us, doing your homework, like a research project or paper of someone in school, writing up a report on that and trying to make a decision of, is this a good place for us to invest our money or is it not? So that's, my daily activity. Since then, I continue to do both activities of, we always are looking at new investment opportunities, but in addition, now we have this portfolio of existing investments. And so I'm managing issues related to any of the existing investments, as well as continuing to analyze and assess new opportunities. Some years ago, my father supported me. I wanted to give back to the community, so I became involved philanthropically as a volunteer. I joined a board of a domestic violence shelter here in town and was on the board for a long time, served as board chair a few different times, helped lead a capital campaign, had some other board experiences with United Way and some other places. And then as our family philanthropy grew under my father, I now represent us as a family in the philanthropic work that we do, which is focused on higher education. Yeah. So as an example, I sit on the Northern Arizona University Foundation Board. I'm currently the board chair. I'm on the foundation board of my alma mater, University of Washington, have some other roles in that manner as well. So life's full. I have a variety of different things I'm involved in and just enjoy that diversity of the work that I do.
Yeah, talking about the philanthropic thing that you were talking about, before I met you, I heard that you and your dad donated $25 million to the W.A. Franke College of Business, but that was all I heard. I don't know anything else, and I would like you to tell me more about why the College of Business here in NAU, why did you decide to donate that much money? All of the things that motivated you to donate to this college.
Sure. So the gift to NAU is representative of several of we've given some other gifts of a similar nature, and it's really driven by a few core principles for us as we think about our philanthropic work. One is we have a focus on higher education. My father looks at his career and his success in life and feels as though so much of it was based on his education and the quality of his education. He went to Stanford University, both undergraduate and for law school, and came from is self-made, came from a rural middle-class family in West Texas. And so I think really feels the power of education and how it influenced his life. So he wanted to focus philanthropy there. So that's first is we focus on higher education. Next is we really want to find places to partner with where we can really change the trajectory of both the school and the student experience within that school, with a focus on trying to support students who are first generation, who are from underserved minority populations, indigenous populations. So when the opportunity arose to look at naming the College of Business at NAU, it fit all of those characteristics. At the time, I believe the largest gift NAU had received, it was maybe $10 or $12 million. So we knew we would be elevating the school and the visibility of both the university as in total, plus the College of Business with the gift. So that was an influential part of the decision. We also saw an opportunity to take what was a really strong school in the College of Business and add some elements to it, such as a focus on communication. So you have the Business Communication Center down there in the building, focus on ethics. We were able to work with the staff to get an ethics class that's part of the first year experience for any college student, and be supportive to some of the other programming. So it wasn't just about scholarships, which scholarships are meaningful and very valuable to students like you. But we want to be transformative in a way. We want to take the program to some greater place if we're able to. But it really, when you go back, there's an NAU alum from the College of Business named Scott Coor, and Scott used to work for my dad at a company my father ran. And Scott is just one of those shucks kind of guys, but who never gives up, never lets go. And so he came to my father and said, the business school at NAU is not named yet. I think it would be great if you were the one to name it. And he just kept poking my dad until we finally got the deal done. So a lot of the credit in a way goes to Scott and his persistence at just trying to just talk to my dad about it, really show the value of NAU, the value of the College of Business, and how not only would our gift benefit the school, but it would benefit us, and it certainly has. So that's how that came about. Yeah.
That's cool. In what year was that?
That was 2008, I believe.
Okay. That's cool. No, that's a good story. Now I know the story behind the College of Business. And moving to another topic, when it comes to investing on ourselves, or in this case, investing in yourself or investing in myself, I have asked like a lot of people, like previous guests on my podcast, other people who are also in the business world, or people that I look to, people that I admire. And something common that I have found is that I would say probably 99% of them always tell me, because I ask them, how should I start investing? And they're like, first, invest on yourself. Talking about investing in ourselves, how do you define that? Like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when, if I tell you like, hey, how do you invest in yourself? Or, yeah.
Sure. So one, I would agree with others in that you can be better to the rest of the world and help create your success if you first start with how do I take care of myself and improve myself, and make sure I'm the best I can be, because if I'm the best I can be, then I can be strong for others. So I think there's, some core pieces to that. One, I think, is education and making sure that you stay focused on, and for some people, it doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional education, but maintaining an interest in the world and a curiosity and wanting to learn about the world and some aspect of the world that interests you. Again, for me and for our family, that's been through a traditional educational experience, but especially in today's world, there's so many other mediums and tools that you can use to educate yourself about different things in the world. And so just taking that time, being disciplined and focused about exploring the world around you. And in saying that, I do think it's helpful to be curious. There are, I have people I know and been around or have experienced who have very narrow areas of focus. I think you're better served if you can have a broad curiosity about the world. You can still be focused on whatever, whether you want to be an engineer or a programmer or an accountant or lawyer, whatever your profession might be, but make sure that you're seeing a broader scope of the world. So education, and then I think just taking care of yourself. I've always been one who's been health oriented, both from a physical diet perspective, exercise, but from a mental perspective as well. I think if you're not taking care of yourself physically to where you don't have the energy, you're just feeling ill or don't have the stamina, or you're carrying a lot of anxiety, maybe or some mental challenges, it can be hard to be effective for the rest of the world. So finding ways to take care of yourself, and a lot of times you have to unplug. I think it's okay to every once in a while, every day, find some moments to unplug, take time for yourself, whether it's actively doing something along those lines of learning something new for you, or going out and doing some exercise. But even if it's just taking some true downtime and scrolling through Instagram or something, just you need those moments for yourself. I think, so I think if you're doing those things where you have a really good set of tools from a knowledge perspective, and then physically and mentally you're prepared to leverage those tools, that allows you to do so much, and then you'll find your passions and your interests and find your way. But you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do also with the kind of atmosphere when you're living. For example, like if your work environment is toxic, probably you need to work even harder to make sure like you're gonna be okay. But if your work atmosphere is like pretty decent, you get along with everyone, it's kind of easier, I would say. Have you ever had to deal with a difficult situation at work? I mean, I assume yes, right?
Yes. um yeah, so I think the example I'll use is some years back, through the office, we became involved in an accelerator group. So a group who was trying to promote venture capital, early stage entrepreneurs here in the Phoenix area. And there were several, the CEO founder of the accelerator is someone we had known for a long time, and he had a strong network here, corporate network. And so he had many of the leading companies around the boardroom as investors, partners. We were one of those. And I quickly became the chair of the board. So I was leading the board from that perspective. And after a couple of years, the business model that the CEO had employed for the accelerator felt like to the board like it was not going to function long term and not be successful, and that we were starting to look at our financial resources and they were starting to dwindle, and we were not seeing a path to sustainability and a path to profitability for the accelerator. So we started having some conversations with the CEO founder. He was someone who was a little older than me, and I actually had looked up to as a mentor and someone I admired. So having that sense of respect for him and seeing him in that sort of mentor role. But I had to start having some tough conversations with him about, the board is feeling like there's a disconnect between the model we've been operating under and how it's creating what feels like some financial distress for the business. And what can we do to rectify that and get on a better path? And he was not willing to, or seemed like he was not willing to listen to the board's point of view. So the conversations became more challenging. And again, as someone who saw this person in as a mentor and someone I respected, it was both disappointing and hard at times to have those challenging conversations and make sure I was doing my ethical job, fiduciary job of representing the board and not my personal relationship with him. It ultimately got to a point where the board felt we needed to remove him from the CEO position. So I had, as his boss, in a way, as the chair of the board, I was the one that was given that job of, it was my responsibility to have that conversation with him, which again was not a comfortable conversation to have for someone who I respected. But, I had that conversation. We made the transition. I tried, and the board tried for a few more years to turn the accelerator around. We were unable to, and so it ultimately folded. But what that was a good lesson and reminder to me of is you do have to separate emotion. You do have to separate and remember what your role is and remember why you're there. And my role was as a board member and as board chair. So I was representing the shareholders and the other board members. And so you have to do what's right and make the right choices for the organization, not for you as an individual, or not because of some personal relationship you had with someone across the table from you. So I try and keep that in mind when I've had other difficult challenges of always coming back to, you have to do what's right. And what's right is for the mission and vision of whatever business or group you're a part of. It's not about any one individual.
Yeah. Moving to another topic, I remember that I was talking to Paul the other day, and he told me that you are also the owner of 3 airlines, including one in Mexico.
We're the owner of 6 airlines,
6?
including
Wow.
one in Mexico. Yes, sir.
Which are these airlines?
So to give you a little more context, so as I described earlier, we have the family office where I work, which invests in lots of things that are not airline related, whether it's real estate or other types of companies or biotech or other investments. My father, now probably about 22 years ago, had some previous experiences, both in being a part of a private equity fund that was focused on Latin America, and then being CEO of an airline, which is a whole story in itself. But and so those 2 experiences of learning the airline business plus knowing how to run a private equity fund, he combined those experiences, and we created our own private equity fund here called Indigo Partners. And the focus of Indigo is to invest in the airline sector around the world. Over the years, we've probably been involved in probably 10 or 12 airlines. Today, the portfolio currently consists of 6 airlines. And we have majority interest in Frontier Airlines here in the US. Volaris is the Mexican air carrier, and it's now
Oh,
become
really? That's so
yeah,
cool.
Volaris. It's now the largest air carrier in Mexico. We have an airline in South America based out of Santiago, Chile, called JetSmart. Flies to Argentina, Peru, and soon Colombia, along with Chile. We have a Canadian airline called Lynx. We have a European airline called Wizz, and then one in the Philippines called Cebu Pacific. But I'm not a part of that. We have a whole team of people that are focused on that work. And I just get to watch what they do. But it's pretty interesting, and it's been a really fun part. My dad has been one of the few who has shown that you can make money investing in airlines.
Definitely. I have flown in Volaris before. I haven't flown like in Mexico probably since 2013 because the other flights have been in the US. But that one I remember that it was Volaris. And I mean, and my dad also flies in that one kind of often, I think.
So Volaris now flies through a lot of the US. They fly here to Phoenix, and then they've moved down into Central America as well. So depending, you could fly them from here or the West Coast. But it's become a good, successful airline for us.
Yeah. Moving now to more, I would say more into your personality, your character, and your values. What has been one of these super or the toughest experience that you have ever faced that helped you a lot to develop the character that you possess today?
So, in my youth, when I was younger, or anytime?
Yeah.
Um, well, so this is a more recent story, but I'd say it was one of the harder things I've faced. So the domestic violence shelter that I mentioned, I was on the board of. I was board chair, and a few years prior to the story I'll tell you, we had hired a new management team. We'd hired a new CEO, COO, and chief marketing officer for the agency. And together with the board, we had developed a really bold vision for where to move the agency. Up until then, we had been just a really strong local Phoenix-based shelter for abused women and children. We had grown, and the board had helped grow the organization successfully, and we had reached a point where we think, the largest shelter in the US in terms of number of beds that we had available. So it had this nice growth path to it. But we were more, our services, like most domestic violence shelter services, were after the fact, when a woman had been abused, or a child, when they had been abused and they're seeking refuge and shelter to escape their abuse. And so we wanted to, since we had this big platform now of being a large provider and a voice nationally in the domestic violence industry, how could we leverage that to do more and to focus a little bit more on areas of the issue that hadn't had a light shown on them, hadn't had any real focus to them. So with this new management team, we developed a really bold vision for how to start to move into some preventative measures. We were looking at brain trauma, which no one had really looked at from a domestic violence perspective. A pet shelter, pets are a barrier for women to leave, and other components to this vision. So we spent a few years really pushing the vision forward. The board was acting kind of like the seed investor, because we had some financial reserves, and we agreed to spend those reserves to help push and grow the vision. And while we had made some great strides, we thought we would, once we launched some of these initiatives, we thought we'd be able to attract large foundation money to help support these initiatives, like say the Gates Foundation as an example. And that didn't happen. So the board was starting to feel like, okay, we're running low on our reserves. We haven't found a financially sustainable model for these new initiatives. We, again, we need to think about this. And, spent several months having some challenging conversations with management around that. And then out of the blue, unexpectedly, as board chair, I received an anonymous email from a staff person that seemed to be unveiling a lot of information that was happening on campus from the leadership team that they were hiding from or not being transparent to the board about. So that became a very interesting and challenging situation because they're making accusations about the management team. And the board, we have to work to determine, are those valid or not? And if so, what's our course of action? So I, with a few other board members, we led an investigative process to try and uncover what we thought was the truth of what was happening. And in our view, based on the work that we did, which was, again, not fun work because you're having very difficult conversations with people, trying to determine who's really telling the truth and what's right and what information were we not receiving, and ultimately decided that we needed to make a change in leadership. And then the decision was, do we remove all three of the leaders, or would that be too destabilizing to the business and the community who supports us? Do we then keep one or two of them? And if so, which ones? And it was just a very difficult process. And remember, I'm doing this as a volunteer, so I'm not getting paid, but I was spending 50-60% of my weeks during this period on this because it was such a big issue for us. And ultimately, we decided that we just couldn't. Again, it's about doing what's right. It's about staying focused on your fiduciary role to the mission and the vision. And so we decided we had to fire all three of them. And so I had to prep for that. We had to have a transition plan ready. We had to have a media plan ready. We had to have a plan about how to talk to our donors, and spent kind of a couple of weeks really fire drill, just pulling that all together. And then I called them here into my office and had to fire the three of them, which, firing anyone is never an enjoyable experience. And then again, had to figure out a transition plan, and we ultimately figured out a transition plan, and the agency still is survived and is thriving today. But that was a really difficult situation. And I think even though it was later in life, it forced me to really think about what are my, values, and how do I treat people, and how do I engage in a difficult process, and how do I communicate across a variety of different stakeholders and people with interest in the business. And ultimately, it was, as chair, it was really up to me to make that call of what's the right decision here. And so you have to look inside and really focus on what feels right to you.
How your mindset looks like?
My mindset?
Yeah.
Again, my mindset was just totally focused on, and I kept calling it back up in moments of doubt or moments of challenge of, I have to do what's right. My role here is to do what's right and what's right for the agency. And to keep that in mind, So similarly, we've had some similar challenges with some of the for-profit businesses that we invest in. Not every deal goes well. Some deals get challenged or fail. And so it's in those moments of challenge or moments of failure where you have to remember, what's the greater purpose here? Yes, I could try and find ways to make this easier on myself, or I could lie to people to make the difficult decisions seem easier to them, or I could keep people in the dark in some way as a way to manage it. And you just can't, you have to, ultimately keep coming back to that mindset of, my job here is to do what's right, and do what's right for the people, do what's right for the company, do what's right for the customer and our stakeholders. It's not about me. It's not about trying to make others comfortable. Still do things in a respectful way, and treat people fairly, but ultimately those decisions have to come from a place of what's right and what's right for the business. And on the airline side, it was interesting, or it's been interesting. Some of the markets that we are engaged in are markets where corruption is just a part of the culture. And we have to go in and say, we're not going to manage our business in this way. And it puts us at a disadvantage to some of our competitors in those markets who come from that background and culture and don't think anything about engaging in corruption. So it's, regardless of where you are and what you're doing, it's trying to just really remember and focus on what's right.
Yeah, it's kind of like never betray yourself, right?
Right.
One
Right.
of the
And
questions,
it's going to be, it's going to be, each situation is different. So there's no one right answer every time, or no, way that you always answer the challenge. You have to look at each situation on its own merits and understand the dynamics that are happening in that moment and with that company and with those specific people, and use that as a way to determine what's right. So it's really learning over time. How do you get a value system and a way of thinking and problem solving that give you some guardrails that you play in and you stay in, but within that flexibility so that you can adapt to each situation.
yeah, that's true. One of the questions that I always ask, or yeah, I would say, yeah, I always ask this question. It's about networking because it's a topic that I'm very passionate about. Like I've been doing this podcast for 4 years, and thanks to the podcast, I have been able to connect with a lot of people that I admire. So I really appreciate that you're here today. But when it comes to networking, it's more about I remember that many people have told me it's more about adding value, trying to know what you can get from these people, how you can contribute to these people, and then kind of like learning from them. So I want to ask you, what would you say that are, let's say, the 2 or 3 most important keys when it comes to networking? Because I assume that you do networking with huge people, super great people. How do you approach them?
Uh, so one, I think you have to be open to the opportunity. I'm an inherently somewhat quiet, shy person, and so it would be easy for me to be either fearful or just not make that choice to engage. But you know, so much of business, as I've learned, is about people that being open to new people and new ideas and new connections. So I think first and foremost, you have to be open to the moment. And when that moment comes, step into that moment and not be afraid to engage with someone. And then once you've done that, then you're going to serve yourself better by engaging and reaching out. And for me, my approach is typically not to aggressively hit them right away with, oh, here's what I think you could potentially do for me, or here's what I think I could get from you. You first, it's relationship building. And so it's first just reaching out and having a conversation like this and just getting to know the other person, letting them get to know you a little bit of who you are and how you operate, things you're involved in. And then for me, I've been told I have a good skill at taking different ideas and connecting them. And so if you have that skill, that's one of the ways I help network is you'll tell me something, Luis, and I'll hear it and I'll say, oh, I know, Joe over here who's doing something similar. It might be really interesting for the two of you to connect. And so I offer that up to you. So not only I think networking helps when the other side feels like you're adding value at no cost. And so not only am I connecting with you, but then in the moment as we're talking, I'm freely offering advice. I'm freely offering other connections based on things we talk about. And then it becomes that flywheel and it really creates a lot more synergies of, in the back of my mind, I'm trying to keep some broader purpose and focus of why I may be talking to this person, but I'm not so focused on that I can't see or provide a broader set of value. Because I think the more you give of yourself in whatever way, people respond to that, and you just never know where it's going to go. And it'll lead to other doors if you keep being open in the conversation to where things might take you. So I would say that about networking.
That's cool. Yeah, I like to ask this question a lot because I always get a different response, and it's like, so now you told me this, so I know kind of like now I know, or now I have an idea on how to approach like someone, for example, right? And who would you say that have been the most unapproachable, or not most unapproachable? Let's say someone that you see right here, someone that is super important, someone that you really admire. Can you tell me an anecdote of someone that you have been able to connect with, someone that you really admire?
Um, I'm gonna have to think about that.
If you want to think about it, I can tell you one anecdote, and then while I'm
Please.
talking,
Yeah.
you can be thinking. All right, so I'll tell you about this professional or former professional baseball player. His name is Jose Luis Sandoval, and he played shortstop for the team of my city in the 90s and early 2000s. So I kind of like grew up watching him on TV, going to the stadium because I really liked the way he played. And I remember that my dad, my grandpa, they would be always talking about that player. And yeah, so that was a really great player. And then I remember that 2 years ago, I was like, that would be so cool if I can have him in my podcast. He has been retired probably like in 2010, 2012, something like that. He's not in social media. He's not in Facebook, Instagram. He has no social media that I can find and connect with him. But I was like, probably I have no chance, but I'll start doing my research. And I found his son on Facebook. And I just sent him a text and I was like, hey, this is Luis. I have this podcast about this and that. And I have had these professional baseball players who played with your dad like years ago. And I would really like to connect with your dad. And I was like, hopefully he replies. Following day in the morning, I wake up. I was in Phoenix and he told me, oh yeah, sounds good. I'm gonna tell my dad and I'll let you know what he says. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, hopefully he says yes. And I was like, probably he's gonna say no, right? Because he doesn't know me. And then probably 2 or 3 days after, he was like, hey, my dad said that he's down to record with you. And he said you can send him a text like to this Instagram profile. He had a profile private, and his son told me he's not really good with technology, so probably he will never see your text. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a try anyway. So I sent him the text. He replied to me like the same day. And then he was like, hey, here's my phone number. Just text me in WhatsApp so it's easier to connect. And I was like, that's cool. I didn't even ask for his phone number. And then he gave me his phone number. We had a call, and then he was like, all right, so we can record on Wednesday. That was on Saturday, so probably I just waited 4 days. And once he connected in Zoom, I was like, wow, I can't believe that I'm talking to you. And I told him like, hey, I have been following you since I was a kid. Like this is kind of like a dream, like being able to talk to you because trust me, I have a lot of questions like to ask you. And it was kind of like I think an hour and 45-minute podcast, but it was like talking to one of my figures that I would look up to when I was a kid. So that's an anecdote.
So, one example, there's so the private equity industry has really been an industry for probably 40 years. but even in the late 80s, early 90s, it was still a young industry, and there was a gentleman who's now become well known in the industry, David Bonderman, and David is someone that my dad had become involved with, but not at my level. I didn't know David at all, other than I knew my dad talked to him sometimes and did some things. And so David happened to be here in town and was visiting, and I hadn't really had any exposure to him. And kind of to what you just described, I decided to go and just introduce myself and start a conversation. And here's this gentleman who's now become kind of an icon in the private equity world, is, you know, interviewed on all the major media outlets, and well known for the work he does. And he and I, you know, ended up having just a great 30-minute conversation, and that developed a rapport. And then we've continued to work with him from a work perspective, but it's been more on the airline side of the things that we do. But what amazes me is I'm able to still have some really just down to earth. He loves music and I love music, and so he and I have these great conversations around music, and to be you know, sitting there talking with this gentleman who I have a lot of respect for, and would have never thought I'd have that kind of conversation with, to be able to sit and talk to him about the Rolling Stones or something, or now I'm able to email him and he responds relatively quickly. I was in Seattle recently, and he has some business interest in Seattle, and I'd heard that he was in town, but too late. And so I just emailed him to say, hey, David, you know, I thought I'd let you know I was in town, but not able to connect. And he immediately responded and said, you know, next time let me know, and happy to grab lunch or something. And it's just, I still find it, you know, fascinating that I can have that kind of conversation and type of relationship with someone at his level. But it shows
cool.
you, you know, that, and as you've learned, that if you treat people well, people are people. Doesn't, you know, regardless of the level of success, which you have to respect, whatever level of success, there's still people like you and me. They're, you know, they have to get up every morning and figure out their day, and you know, do their job and pay their bill. They're just people.
Uh, what would you say have been the most famous people you have ever met, like on a one-on-one conversation?
I'm
I'm just curious.
it's a whole other story, but I've had an opportunity to have a sit down conversation with Ice Cube.
With who?
Ice Cube.
I don't know them.
Oh, he's a well-known, it's not necessarily my music, but he's a well-known hip hop rap artist turned actor and producer. And yeah, he in the entertainment world, he's
Okay.
very well known. From a different perspective, this goes back probably 25 years ago. I happened to be playing golf out at a course in North Scottsdale, and Charles Barkley, who loves golf, you know, famous basketball player and ex-Phoenix Suns player, and he was there and just hanging out and talking, and started talking with us, and had a great, and he was, again, totally down to earth and friendly, and just happy to sit and hang with us for a little bit. I had that opportunity with a few other, probably more in kind of the entertainment celebrity venue, but yeah, you never know where life's gonna take you.
Have you ever had the opportunity to meet, like, I don't know, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, or Bill Gates, or one of like the popular business people that are in social media like nowadays?
Um, Anyone recent? Not at that level. I can't give away the surprise, but soon I'm going to have that opportunity, and with one of the people you named, but I can't tell you which yet,
Okay.
because it's supposed to be a confidential thing. You know, again, this is from in the world I play from an investment perspective. Another one of the long-standing early private equity firms is KKR. The R, it's for their last names, and the R is a gentleman, George Roberts, who was went to Stanford at the time my father was there, and George is another person. He loves golf. He has some memberships to very exclusive golf courses. I've had the opportunity to email him and say, hey, I'm going to be in the San Francisco area. Any possibility you could help me and a few guys go play this particular golf course? And he helps get us set up and takes care of us. And, again, it's just nice to see, there's he's not being a prima donna, or he's a nice guy and is doing it and being very friendly about it. But yeah, I know there's someone I'm forgetting. There is someone I've been a couple of years ago, but I'm forgetting. Anyway, it's, again, my whole approach in any of those situations is I don't get starstruck or try and treat them like a celebrity. I just, and almost talk to them about anything but their profession, or what they're famous for, and just try and treat them as a real person, and start a genuine conversation.
Yeah, that's true. When you were growing up, like in your professional life, do you remember that day when you told yourself, "Oh, I kind of reached the goal that I had. I feel now financially stable. I think that I'm doing good." Do you remember that day when you were kind of like acknowledging your success?
I would say I don't know if I've had that day yet.
Okay.
Um, in the sense that, well, two things. So one, I'm not one who sets very specific. I have really long-term life goals, and those are what drive me. I'm not one who sets annual. I know I have some friends who set like annual goals for themselves, or I more set these really big, broad life goals. And as long as I feel like I'm on that path and moving towards those, then I feel like I'm being successful in what I'm doing. And they're pretty kind of basic. I want to have a really good family life and be a good father and good to my kids. I want to have enough financial resources to be able to take care of myself, take care of my family. And then I want to do work that feels rewarding and meaningful and that I enjoy. And those are kind of the, like these big goals. And whether that's right or wrong or good or bad, I don't know. But just for me, that's what works, and that's how I work. And so, because life, what I feel like my friends who plan much more explicitly and set 6-month goals and 12-month goals, and at the end of those periods, I'll say, were you even in the ballpark of what you thought you were going to be? And most of the time, it's the answer is no, because life takes you in such unexpected directions every day. And it's really when you set yourself up for such defined goals and then you don't hit them because life took you, it can feel like you're not heading in the right direction, or you are hard on yourself because I missed that goal that I had set. And so I generally look at life in a big picture way. And so again, if I feel like I'm generally moving, and I know life's going to go in a zigzag path forward, but as long as I feel like I'm moving towards those core goals that I set, then I feel like I'm doing well in it. because I think that's one of the things, and something I tell young people when I have a chance to be in front of them is, keep your eyes open for opportunity, and be willing to shift and kind of see where what's around the next corner. It could be scary, it could be failure, it could be something that turns out in a way that you weren't expecting, but if you don't take the chance, you'll never know. And so to be open, and not just that you're just jumping without purpose, or but if it feels like it's keeping you and moving on a path and providing some new opportunity, be open to it. So I'm one who tends to be a little more loose in how I define my goals.
Yeah, I want to ask you one question that might be kind of like cultural, and it's about money. Because, for example, growing up back home in Mexico, I moved to the US until I turned 18. Now I'm 23, almost 24. But growing up in that culture, I was always kind of like curious about money because, for example, yeah, okay, so for my birthday, I want to like fundraise, I don't know, $100. Now I can buy these baseball cleats or this new baseball glove or something like that. And I remember like I would be like, oh yeah, like in my birthday, I fundraise, let's say $200, and I would be telling my grandma and my parents, and my grandma would be like, hey, but I mean, money is not everything. Money is
Right.
stop thinking about money and stuff like that. But I was kind of like, yeah, but it's important. It's like there was a time in my life when I was 17, almost 18, that I was like, if I want to go to the US to study, I need to start fundraising, working hard, selling. I had to sell like barbecue, tortas, a lot of stuff. And my grandma would be helping me a lot. I published a book in 2017, 2018, just to be able to pay for my sophomore year. And then I would be telling my grandma, hey, now you understand that money means education in this case or stuff like that. And when I came to the US, that I was more involved, like right now in the College of Business or conversation with other professors, money is not a taboo here. But I would like to ask you, like, how do you approach this topic when you need to have like hard conversations about money, about an investment? Because I think it's not like a big taboo here in the US, right?
Right. Yeah. So when you gave me the examples that you gave of yourself of trying to, so it really wasn't about the money. It was about, I'm trying to get myself educated. I need money to get educated. So I need to write a book and sell it to get money for it. So the driving factor was your goal of an education. Money is just how you get there. Your goal was to come to the United States. Money is just a tool for how, so it wasn't that the focus was about money. The focus was a goal for your personal growth. But in order to achieve that goal, you knew you needed some resources, financial resources. So I think, that's a different way I would look at the examples that you gave. And so I think, similarly, when I think about the work that we do, or even when I was young, I would agree with your grandmother that money's not everything. There are a lot more important things, or they're not that money's not important, but and I try and instill that in my own children as well, that money's a tool, and it's a tool to help you achieve objectives that you have in life. So don't get so focused on just, I've got to make money to make money because that's the American dream, and it's, this, and get caught up in that. Do it because it's helping you in a greater purpose. And yet in my work, that's the focus of, we're trying to take $1 today and invest it to hopefully have it be worth $3 or $5 or something down the road. And so money is a central part of what we talk about and what we're focused on. But again, I've never felt like, and don't feel like in our office, that it's about just that pure effort to just get more money. We engage because we think these are interesting projects and interesting businesses, and we're engaging in them because, yes, we then believe because they're interesting businesses or projects, they will make money over time, and that's what we're doing. So they're very much in tandem. So I can't escape that conversation about money. It's very central to what we do. But I think, that then also gets back to the early conversation around ethics and values. If you're just purely focused on money for money's sake, it will oftentimes cause you to make poor decisions or lower your values or cut corners because you're solely focused on making money. If there's some purpose to the money that you're making, it will help guide you to have a better value and decision system in the work that you do.
What an answer. No, thank you. And the last question that I have for you before we stop recording, what are some of the most important habits that you have that make you feel like motivated, energized, like make you feel like good with yourself and feeling that you can contribute to those who are around you?
So I think from sports and your sports background, practice, dedication, a good work ethic, really in anything that you do in life, whether it's for fun or for work, is a core piece of how you create success. And so I think, that's been very helpful to just have a strong and have, I had parents who set a good example of a strong work ethic, and that was then instilled in me. I think communication and how you communicate to people is so important. Treating people fairly with respect, how you engage in the world is really something I try and focus on. So as I get up every day, I'm thinking about it, sometimes not even outwardly thinking about them or focus, but it's become a part of the embodiment of what I'm trying to do each day is work hard, treat people right, make good decisions, be fair and ethical, and then just get up and be excited it's a gift to be on this planet, to have a human life, to engage with people like you in this world, and find things that get you excited. Now, not everyone, some people have very challenging environments that they come from, and I recognize it, and I recognize I'm in a place of privilege today, and so I don't say that lightly, in that I know sometimes people, you have to have a job that you don't like, or you're having to be a part of other work or decisions that maybe you wouldn't normally choose, but because of your situation, you're just forced to. But even in those moments, it's trying to find some purpose and value in why you're doing that. And it goes back to really then to make those moments more tolerable and to be able to get up every day. It gets back to focusing on finding that time to focus on you and take care of yourself, and find moments of joy and pleasure in life. So those are just sort of the basic things that guide me each day.
Thank you. And thank you again for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. And something that I always do with my guests of Empower, now that I already asked you like 100 questions, ask me 1 or 2 questions about anything. If a previous guest already asked me that question, you got to choose another one.
So you've been doing these podcasts for a while and have talked to different people. What are the 1 or 2 things, what are the few of the key things that you've learned from all the conversations that you take with you?
I would say the most important one is definitely networking. That's what I was very passionate about, that topic, because when I just started, it was in January 2020, before the pandemic, and it was just about like me sharing my experiences, trying to give back to the community in that way, because like when I published my book, I would be going to places just to sell it, to talk about it, kind of like more inspirational stuff. But then I was like, I cannot continue doing that because of the pandemic, because of traveling, because of I was at a community college at that time. And I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast and I'm gonna be sharing my experiences as an international student in the US, and probably some people from the US, from back home, can get benefit from that. Something else that I have learned, it's what we were talking about before. I was trying to add value because, for example, and there have been like some cases, for example, with professional baseball players that I grew up admiring and that I have had them in the podcast that I still like try to reach out to them. For example, the broadcaster of the D-backs, it was his birthday yesterday. So I sent him a text and I was talking to him, and then I invited him to get lunch with me in December. I had him in March last year, and in December I was back home and he was in Hermosillo as well. So I was like, hey, do you wanna go get lunch with me? We went to this bowling place and we got breakfast actually. It was breakfast. And and that was just like a really nice conversation, like to kind of like to get to know him in a more genuine way, kind of like to enhance a relationship with him. And yeah, that's I would say the couple things that I have learned from Empowered.
Great. So when you think about your future, where do you hope to make impact?
In a baseball environment, 100%. Yeah, that's the thing that I just finished the season with NAU 2 days ago on Sunday, and thinking back, like, I mean, the reason why I came to the US in 2017 was because I wanted to become a professional baseball player. It was not for education at all. Then when I got injured before the tryout, I was like, all right, I'm injured, I recovered, and then I was like in 2018, okay, one more shot. Then I didn't make the team in the community college, and I just realized that I was not at the level where I wanted to be and where people wanted me to be at. And I was like, I need to start focusing on school, finding a job, being able to pay for education. That's why I published my book. That's why I started like to find jobs and stuff like that. And and yeah, it has been about that. So I have realized that baseball has had and still has a huge impact in my life. The values, for example, when it comes to discipline, to responsibility, to eating and exercising or sleeping habits, like no drugs, no alcohol, not any of this, is because of baseball. Because I'm like, I grew up like playing baseball since I was 3 years old. So when I was 14, 15, 16, 18, even until now, it's like I have never feel like tempted to get drugs. I have never feel tempted like to spend my weekend just drinking with friends. It's like I have never been like that type of person. I think my parents, of course, like they play a huge role in it. But I would say that baseball was like even like eating pancakes. I was like, I cannot because I don't want to be feeling heavy on the field. So before a game, I'm not gonna eat this. I'm gonna eat this and that so I can feel better in the game. So I would say like everything in my life has a strong connection with baseball. And if I'm able to make an impact on youth in the baseball area, I mean it would never feel like a job, you know?
Yep. No, that's so I have no doubt that you'll find your place in baseball. You're passionate, dedicated, good work ethic, and you're continuing to network and get connected, and something will pop for you. It'll be, probably unexpected, but it'll be a good outcome for you.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, Dave, thank you again for being in Empowered. We really appreciate you. And for those people who are listening, please don't forget to share it in your Instagram stories, Facebook stories. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed and see you in the next episode. Anything
Yeah,
else
thank
that you would
you.
like to add?
No, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.